I mean, what's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team.
I would be very careful about slinging stuff.
Am I going to get sued?
We got legal on this?
I like football season, and all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live here on YouTube, Wednesday edition of the podcast. Sam, how you doing, man?
Not bad. How about you, Steve?
Doing great. We can banter a little bit more now.
Oh, yeah?
Because yesterday, I mean, it was all business.
Yeah.
We had to cover every game from week 16, but it's our Wednesday edition, and we're going to talk. We do these. Have we been calling them autopsies? What were we calling them before?
Yeah, I think so.
Something like that. On teams that were eliminated from the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Why were they eliminated? What went wrong? And just kind of setting the stage for our favorite time of the year, or at least my favorite time of the year, the offseason. The offseason when we get to fix all these teams. We'll fix them in 5 minutes at some point in March. We always do that.
Allegedly.
5 minutes. That's it. And we'll have some fun with that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to highlight really quick. There's two things. We have to tell people about the award that we're up for.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to give a shout out to my brother-in-law for a great gift.
Yeah?
From Christmas. He sent me 2 starting lineup figures from my favorite team, the 90s Jags. The late 90s Jags. Look at this. Tony Baselli and Jimmy Smith. What a gift. This is the best gift I've gotten since the late 90s, I think. Jimmy Smith
90s.
and Tony Baselli, starting lineup figures. I'm gonna be the crazy person that like tweets it out and tags them. Hey, look, I got this gift. You know, Jimmy will retweet it. Jimmy's pretty active on Twitter.
Yeah. Though
But
he
I
then
thought that was a good gift.
goes dark when you try and DM the man.
Oh, he still hasn't gone back to you, huh?
No.
I'll reach out on your behalf.
You do
See what
that.
I
Yeah,
can do.
absolutely. Yes, absolutely. We need people to go and vote for us for this award that we're up for, so we can become an official award-winning podcast
Needs
as
to be.
opposed to just a self-proclaimed one.
And not just award nominated.
No.
We want to win.
Look, everybody will say it's just an honor to be nominated, but you want to win, and we want to win. So there we are. We're a finalist for the Best American Football Podcast in the Sports Podcast Awards, and it's an open vote, which means we can rig it, or at least, have as much of a shot as anybody to try and get people to go and vote for it. So,
has anybody written a macro for us to?
I swear we have to get
voting?
that done. If you had a teammate that could do that, like in the early 2000s, surely hackers have reached the point now where we can rig this whole thing.
We absolutely could.
One last reminder, the UI on your phone is terrible. So if you're trying to do it that way, it's not going to work. But it works very quickly on a desktop. So appreciate all the votes, and hopefully we can all become an award-winning podcast together.
It's together. We do everything. It's all together here. It's a family. We all want to win this award together. We'll share
Should
it.
be in the description of the podcast, and if it's not there, it's on my pinned tweet at PFF_Sam.
All right, so you want to let's get into some fun here, which is talking about the teams that are out of the playoffs. We'll talk plenty. I mean, we've only got 2 more weeks to talk about these teams, to preview their games, and because they're eliminated, they're out, and they're already looking at the offseason. So let's go team by team. Starting in the AFC, let's go with the New York Jets. Do we have a big eliminated graphic? Do we have that?
Eliminated.
New York Jets eliminated from playoff contention. They're 6-9. What went wrong for the Jets this year, Sam?
Well, 5 snaps into the season, Aaron Rodgers blew his Achilles,
It's a rough start.
and therefore their season went up in smoke. The end.
Yeah, not great. It's interesting discourse around the Jets. Your famous your pinned tweet, is it still there? Peyton Manning.
Well, no, not now, because the voting is.
The voting is. Oh, I need to.
Yeah.
What's the morality of? I've got a buddy. We were raising money because his daughter was born with a disease. I've been raising money for him.
Yeah.
That's my pinned tweet right now. Do I switch that in for the voting?
No, I think you can leave it. That's a better cause than us just trying to win an award.
Okay.
You can do highlighted tweets, which I don't really understand how they work, but you can highlight multiple tweets that way.
We should learn. So your old tweet was, like basically we don't practice with our backup quarterback. We don't have a plan for that.
Yeah, Tom Moore once asked, John Gruden once asked Tom Moore why Peyton Manning's backups don't get more practice reps. And he said, fellas, if 18 goes down, we're fucked. We don't practice fucked. Yeah, pretty much sums it up.
So there are people who are criticizing the Jets as Joe Flacco off the couch is leading the Browns to the playoffs.
Yeah, and
as
look,
Jacoby Brissett's coming in and making the Commanders look viable, that the Jets did not go out and try to salvage their season.
and I think there is some validity to that. Like, but I think overall the general outcome is still, if you have to turn to backup quarterbacks in the season, you're probably screwed. Now, the Browns are making it work, and other teams have gotten by. But we've talked before, there tends to be a shelf life to these backup quarterbacks. Like Jake Browning turned into a pumpkin twice against the Steelers, right? And outside of that, he's looked fantastic. But, Josh Dobbs was being the quarterback that was talked about, that the Jets should have gone and got Josh Dobbs. Would have cost him nothing. Clear upgrade over Zach Wilson. Well, Josh Dobbs has been benched for Nick Mullins, who himself might be benched this week because he's been terrible. Like, I don't know if you can predict the performance of these backups. You have to just cross your fingers and hope that you're going to get 2 or 3 or 4 good games out of them and, disappear before it all turns to hell again. Now, I think the Jets should have done something because clearly Zach Wilson was going to be the guy. Tim Boyle, with all due respect to him, was only there because Aaron Rodgers liked him. Like, he wasn't a real option, you know what I mean? So they needed something else, anything else. And it honestly doesn't matter what it was. Just make a move before the deadline where you can't really make moves anymore, and they didn't do anything. So I think their season went up in smoke when Rodgers went down. That being said, if you want the real difference between the Jets and the Browns this year, it's the offensive line. Now, I know the Browns are now down like 3 starting caliber tackles, but the Jets never had 3 starting caliber tackles in the first place. And even had Aaron Rodgers been healthy all year, that line might have been a problem bad enough to prevent the team, having the kind of success that they wanted anyway. So I think the true cause of death for the Jet season this year is Rodgers not making it past, the first drive. But the biggest problem on the roster was the offensive line.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go next. Yeah, cause of death. That's what we're calling it that, but we were definitely highlighting that in our autopsies here.
Yeah, that's what the coroner does, right?
Yes. The Jets' offensive line, there's only 2 offensive lines in the NFL, or just 2 teams in the NFL, because this includes tight ends, running backs, that are bottom 5 in both pass blocking and run blocking grade. And it's the Giants and Jets. It's all in the same stadium. There has not been good blocking in that stadium, or when they go on the road for that matter. Jets having the 3rd lowest pass blocking grade. So it is interesting that if Aaron Rodgers was there, what would that look like? Because he always had pretty pristine pass blocking in Green Bay. I don't think Rodgers always had the best pass catchers outside of Devontae Adams. He always had like a true number 1 type.
Right.
But I don't think he had a great receiving core ever. But he always had really good pass protection. And, that would have been – that's the offseason priority for the Jets, which is why on the review show the other day I said they just fell to 9th in the draft order. They might be out of the running for one of the 2 blue-chip offensive tackles. We'll see if other guys emerge. But something to keep an eye on here for the Jets. Cause of death, Aaron Rodgers plus the offensive line. Good job by the defense. 2nd straight year.
Yeah.
Just incredible job by the defense. Number 1 coverage grade in the NFL. And it's not just corners. It is their entire back 7 has been elite this year.
Yeah, and I know they've given up a lot of points in certain games, and they've kind of collapsed in certain games. I don't know that you can overstate, how important it is that the offense is just not bringing anything to the table. Like, even though the Browns are in a similar situation in terms of elite defense, backup quarterbacks, like, their offense has always been able to move the ball, more or less, right? They've been able to at least hold up their end of the bargain for a while and at least give the defense the feeling that all they need to do is to hold again, right? The Jets are in this rut now where they know the offense isn't going to move the ball. It's probably going to go 3 and out. They're going to be back in the field again, and then they just, they know if they don't score, it's not enough. So I think people are giving the Jets defense a little bit too much criticism because of the way they've fallen off in some games.
I'm not seeing that. Where are you seeing that?
It's out there.
Okay. The points against number, again, like there are dependencies in every stat and number. That does depend on the offense too.
Right.
It is a big factor. Field position and, like you said, just the mental toll of we got to pitch a shutout here. So I think the Jets defense has been very good for the most part this season. All right, we got no more use for the Jets. As a parent, you've had to learn so many new skills to provide for your family, how to do copious amounts of laundry, meal plan, even for even the pickiest eater, and now how to protect your family's financial future. Well, Fabric by Gerber Life provides an easy one-stop shop for your family's financial needs, offering high-quality term life insurance policies plus other financial solutions in one easy online hub. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high-quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies that fit your family and your budget, like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule. You can go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. So join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. MEET fabric.com/PFFNFL. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Insurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, man, staying in the AFC East, the New England Patriots eliminated. They're 4-11, eliminated from playoff contention. Number 4 overall draft pick at the moment. 1-7 at home. It was the Patriots hit rock bottom multiple times this year. Multiple times. They're starting to creep out of it the last few weeks. There's a little, optimism. It's not even optimism. They're playing better in recent weeks. They're winning a few games, but rough season in New England this year.
Yeah, they hit rock bottom and then bounced on rock bottom a few times.
Yeah, it felt like they hit rock bottom in week 4 and then like week 8 and then week 12 and then they're crawling back up right now and crawling out of top 2 pick consideration.
Yeah. Well, their biggest problem is that Mac Jones played like crap. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
The Bill O'Brien coming in to fix him and get Mac Jones back to being the rookie version of Mac Jones didn't work. Mac Jones played terribly. He lost it. He completely unraveled, and that should have been benched long before he actually was. And the only reason he wasn't is that Bailey Zappi is the only alternative they had, and they knew that that's unlikely to be the dramatically better than Mac Jones. Now, he was last game, but by and large, I think Bailey Zappi is going to give you vaguely comparable play to what Mac Jones was giving you. So they just persisted, and Jones never pulled himself out of this. I mean, he had 11 big-time throws this year, which is, whatever, it's a fine number. 23 turnover-worthy plays. Like a turnover-worthy play rate of almost 6%. That's huge. More interceptions than touchdowns. 6.1 yards per attempt. Like a grade of 52 when he was at 80 in his rookie season. I mean, his grading has now gone 80, 67.5, which was like a crisis of regression that we had to avert and reverse course on, and then continued plumbing new depths to 52.2. That's amazingly terrible as a career arc. You've gone from really encouraging start, worrying regression year 2, and then absolute collapse year 3, and now the guy's career is like toast.
And he was pretty good in weeks 1 and 2. Like weeks 1 and 2, they took it to the Eagles, had a fourth quarter comeback attempt that fell short. Same thing in the Miami game in week 2.
And honestly, even that game was like...
I'm not saying he was great. I'm just saying it like the wheels really fell off.
Yeah, but it was like a good week 1, right? Good opening week, and that had a bunch of turnover-worthy plays. But good. Like he had some big-time throws in there. Grade was good. 3 touchdowns, 300 yards. Like good week 1. Week 2... not so much. They clung in the game, so the overall results were okay, but his performance was a little bit ropey. And then from that point on, it's like awful.
It really puts a wrench in player evaluation. And look, I think the way we tend to do it, the PFF grade is supposed to isolate players' performance, and then we look for context around that, which is why we talk so much about Kyle Shanahan and his scheme and all the derivatives of that scheme and how much those might prop up a player, because those things matter. The context matters. It really throws a wrench in the analysis when you have a guy like Mac Jones, who had a very encouraging rookie season, and it was really just the first 11 or 12 weeks, whatever that cutoff was. Like if you do a certain time period back to like week 12 or 13 of his rookie season, I mean, he's the worst quarterback in the NFL by a wide margin.
Yeah.
But for the first 10 or 11 weeks, it was like, this is a very impressive rookie season. He's accurate, making good decisions. And, Mac Jones looks pretty good. And then it's like, all right, well, in year 2, they really screwed him, right? They brought in the defensive coordinator. They brought in a defensive guy to call plays. He's never done that. Of course, that's the reason why he regressed. And then they bring in his old buddy, right? This is what throws the wrench in the analysis. They bring in his old familiar play caller in Bill O'Brien. This is going to save Mac Jones, and it got worse, to your point. Those are challenging. When you just, a guy, like, it was clearly something mental was happening. He wasn't seeing the field. He wasn't, everything was off, and he was just put the ball on the turf, throwing the ball to the defense over and over again. It was bad. It was just very bad.
You remember at draft time who my comp for Mac Jones was?
Mark Bulger.
Yeah. Doesn't it feel like he just had Mark Bulger's career, but in like 3 seasons?
Yeah.
You like condensed the timeline, but it's the same thing. Like start off, wow, look at this guy. Where did he come from? Look at what we found. And then it sort of progressively got worse, and ultimately the end was miserable, and they had to get rid of him. Like he just went on the entire Mark Bulger career arc in 3 seasons.
To remind people about what Mark Bulger did, and it's fascinating given all of the discussions these days about systems and playmakers and everything. In 2002, Mark Bulger was a rookie. He came in for an injured Kurt Warner and was very good. Now, Kurt Warner came out of nowhere and put up those MVP caliber numbers and was thrown to Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt and Az Hakim with this. It wasn't an easy system with Mike Martz, but it was an aggressive, NFL hasn't seen it type of system. And Warner does these great things. Trent Green also came in and did these great things when he was hurt, replacing Warner, flipping the script. And then Bulger comes in, goes 6-1, passer rating of 101 at that time is massive.
Right.
And then they gave him the job. Like they kicked Warner out of the building because Bulger was so good, and he goes 12-3 the next year with a bunch of picks because, that's what that system does, but a lot of yards. And so Bulger has a few years of just incredible production and then completely lost it, right? His sack rate's through the roof, and he wasn't as good.
Yeah, and the offensive line fell apart with the Rams. It was bad anyway, and it got worse. Part of the reason Kurt Warner was kicked to the curb is that the offensive line had kind of broken him a few times, and Mark Bulger was able to make it work, but the offensive line never got any better. In fact, it got worse, and that it ended up breaking Mark Bulger as well. But yeah, I think Bulger hit higher heights than Mac Jones ever did.
Yeah.
But it is a comparable sort of progression here. Like he started off, the start of his career is the best thing that he's shown, and then it got progressively worse from there. He got worse. The situation around him got worse, and I think those two things
it's really good.
Like folded in on a spiral, and just the whole thing went to hell.
If you just need the perspective, you're right. It's compressed.
Yeah.
And Bulger hit high highs. He's a 4,000-yard passer. All these things when that stuff mattered, I think. But then the last 3 years of Bulger's career, passer rating in the low 70s, and 2-10, 2-13, 1-7. His last 3 years starting, right? So the team had success early. Team had zero success toward the end, and all of his production fell off. Google Mark Bulger stats. It's an interesting comp. The last thing I just wanted to say here, again, in the challenge of player evaluation and how much the situation matters, and we try to quantify the situation, and then it looks like the situation gets better and the production gets worse. But is this the biggest drop off for a rookie quarterback that showed promise since RG3? I think it is. I don't think we've seen too many. Like RG3 was rookie of the year. Mac Jones was the best by a mile. Remember the 2021 class?
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence was terrible. Justin Fields couldn't figure it out. Trey Lance never saw the field. And Zach Wilson has been pretty much the same guy the entire time. Mac Jones was the only guy showing promise. It was like Mac Jones, then Davis Mills for a while, ranking the 2021 class until Trevor Lawrence took his big step and started playing well, and Justin Fields showed something. That's what it was. And then that completely flipped. So I think it's the biggest drop-off for a rookie quarterback since RG3. I'm hard-pressed to think of others who were better as a rookie and then just disasters in year 2 and 3.
Yeah, it wasn't as smooth a progression as that, but Baker Mayfield set rookie records, and then at the end of last season was like, this guy can't play anymore. Yeah,
that's true. Baker had elements of that. And RG3, you could go back and there was a distinct point in time where his knee injury in the playoffs, that affected him the next year. He tried to play a different style. There were probably more reasons for RG3's drop-off than maybe for Mac Jones because, again, like Baker Mayfield, Mac Jones' drop-off didn't matter. But, that's the cause of death, man. The other part is the reason why we're here, Bill Belichick. The GM is under fire. Clearly, he can still coach defense. Their defense is playing really well despite all the injuries that they've had on that side of the ball. But the offense has been a disaster, and whatever offensive development they had for Mac Jones the playmaker situation, the offensive line, not signing tackles this offseason, all that stuff added up, that the offense was just incompetent compared to the rest of the league.
Yeah, I don't think it's all Mac Jones' fault, but ultimately the cause of death of the Patriots is he completely collapsed and unraveled, and they didn't have a viable quarterback of any description. Certainly earlier in the year, the offensive line was at its worst. The skill position players, I think, are still a weakness, but they're not prohibitively bad. Like every time the Patriots play, there's a deep ball that goes off, and you're like, oh, look, Devontae Parker's with the Patriots still.
Yeah.
You know, you wouldn't know it from production or any kind of offensive success. But if Devontae Parker was transported onto a working offense, you'd be like, he's a pretty useful receiver. But with the Patriots,
as a three, that is like George Pickens, right?
But I think the fact that the situation is as bad as it is makes the receiving group look worse.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
And it's been not just this year, but this has been a multi-year problem. It's not a good receiving core, but I don't think it's been as bad as it's looked for years because everything around it is worse.
All right, let's go to the Tennessee Titans. Eliminated. 5-10. Tennessee Titans. Cause of death for the Titans this season.
One of the worst offensive lines in the NFL.
Man, this is going to be a consistent
terrible
trend.
Yeah,
Jets,
it is.
Patriots, Titans.
It's actually, I think,
Giants.
rare where you get, a collection of teams, either good or bad, where everything sort of points in one direction. But basically every team that's been eliminated so far is a terrible offensive line.
So you're going with the specific cause of death. I'll take it a step back and say this was the team last year at this time when we got into the offseason talk and what was going to happen in free agency. Two things happened. One real big thing happened. The Titans started a rebuild last offseason, right? We would say when we were fixing every team in 5 minutes before free agency, we'd look at every team's depth chart, and they all had reasonable starters, and they had guys ready to come back.
Yeah.
But the Titans had to they overhauled the whole thing. They released a whole bunch of good players, and then they brought in a DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah,
right. So they were the half in, half out, where competitive rebuild. I mean, to me, that's where it went wrong. As far as why didn't they make the playoffs this year? They're in the middle of this competitive rebuild. We want to be good enough, but we're thinking to the future. We're thinking about next year. On field, absolutely. The offensive line has been rough. And when the guys have been injured, they're putting in backups that aren't much better because that's what happens with backups. It's definitely that. I think the cornerback situation, it's the worst outside cornerback situation in the NFL this year. So I think there's been a few issues, but the reason is they're in the middle of this competitive rebuild, and the competitive part was lacking this year.
Yeah, they ranked dead last in pass blocking efficiency as an offensive line this season. And that's a hard thing to do this year of all years when you consider some of the offensive lines that are out there. Actually, how many teams have we got that are eliminated? 8?
Sounds right.
Well, the bottom 4 are
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah. So for the bottom 4 spots in pass blocking efficiency in terms of offensive lines this season are eliminated. 5 out of the bottom 6 are eliminated. Almost all of the worst offensive lines in the league this year in terms of pass blocking are already dead. It's a big connecting factor here.
Yeah. I mean, that's an issue. Creep back toward average, all of you.
Right. The Jets were next. The Jets are second worst in terms of pass blocking efficiency. The Titans are worse than the Jets. That's how bad they have been.
Yeah, I think that's part of the thing that was supposed to be in Brock Purdy's favor is that the 49ers pass blocking grades at least are in that same boat as some of these other teams, and they're still able to produce at a top-notch level. I know that's not the story this week, but anything else about the Tennessee Titans and how they got here? We see on the screen here one of their big offseason moves, signing left tackle Andre Dillard. He had never really been a starter for an extended period of time. That has not worked out. So again, I think they felt like they were in this. Look at the contract for Andre Dillard, 3 years, $29 million. That's like a mid-level tackle contract. Everything that they did felt kind of half in, half out. I'm not saying that signing a tackle for 3 years, just under $10 million a year is bad, but everything that the Titans did was kind of like, hey, we're going to get rid of the high-priced guys. We're going to bring in some mid-tier type of starters at mid-tier money, but we really want to build through the draft and rebuild it, from the ground up.
Like the halfway house of competitive rebuild, I don't really have a take on either way. I don't have a problem with it. There are teams that do it. I don't know if I would go that approach if I was, in charge of a team, but I don't think that that's a reason that things didn't work out. Ultimately, the problem was they just made too many mistakes in terms of personnel. Like they had a bunch of different moves that were a part of this whole thing, and almost all of them have failed. So spending money on Andre Dillard to come in and fix your left tackle spot, this is not a hindsight move. That was a move that at the time looked ridiculous as a concept, right? There's literally nothing other than the fact that Dillard was a former first-round pick that says that's going to work. He's been a pretty bad NFL player, and the chances of him having not only a career year, but like improving his baseline, going from A, the best offensive line in the NFL, and B, the best offensive line coach in the NFL to your team, neither of those things are true, is minimal, and it didn't work out. So that's one. Treylon Burks, first-round wide receiver, essentially has to replace A.J. Brown because they traded him away. So far, Treylon Burks has done almost nothing and has been banged up and injured, et cetera, et cetera. So that didn't work. They spent big money on edge rushers recently. That hasn't worked out. Bud Dupree is already not with the team. Harold Landry's been injured, so okay, that's just unlucky. But just so many moves that they've made across this roster have almost all failed, and that's a huge problem. Like, you just can't swing and miss that many times and have it work out. I mean, Will Levis right now has the potential to basically rescue this entire roster, and honestly, he might not be getting enough credit for how he's playing when you consider how bad the offensive line is in front of him, because, I mean, you shouldn't be able to play even vaguely functional football behind that group.
Yeah, I think that sums it up. Third, the other thing, again, I'll mention is the pass defense has not been great. Third worst EPA per play allowed against the pass this year, and I think a lot of it is in that secondary, particularly at cornerback.
Right, and that's same idea, right? Like the moves that they've made there. They draft a first-round corner, complete failure, total and utter failure. Sean Murphy-Bunting comes in as a free agent, hasn't played up to the level they need or expected from him. Like, again, just the moves they've made, they've whiffed.
The real cause of death, though, as you highlighted, was 2 years ago, A.J. Brown. It's been downhill since the
trade away your one superstar.
Yes, since the A.J. Brown trade.
Rather than pay him what is a pretty modest contract from a wide receiver point of view.
Again, at a high level, understanding that how did they get to the AFC Championship in 2019 and were very competitive with Ryan Tannehill? Was there run game elements? Was it relying on Derrick Henry? Like, I think they did well with that, but I think the elite receiver, A.J. Brown, was the driver for Tannehill's most productive seasons and for the Titans' best seasons. And we're in that world where if you don't have an elite quarterback, and there's very few of those elite quarterbacks, if you don't have one, elite receiver is the next best thing to elevate your offense.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a lot of these problems are just lingering effects from, previous. John Robinson has been fired as GM, but a lot of these are his moves we're talking about. Like, it's just, this is the cause and effect of a few years of bad roster and cap management.
All right, let's wrap up the AFC with the Los Angeles Chargers. Eliminated. They're 5-10. Brandon Staley, head coach, has been fired. Cause of death for the Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah, this one's tougher because they're not one of the teams with a bad offensive line.
Too much hope? It was just too much hope.
So they have a pretty good offensive line. They've also got Justin Herbert now. He's been banged up again for the second year in a row. Honestly, their biggest problems have been, Brandon Staley's inability to turn that defense into anything viable has been a problem since he got there. That's a big issue. But basically just, like, players that are supposed to be pillars of this thing not firing. The player who we must not mention. I think we can go back to mentioning him because he's not playing well. Derwin James.
Ooh, there it
Derwin
is.
James.
First time in over a year.
Right. Has had a terrible year this year. And he's not alone. I'm not saying it's all Derwin James' fault, but Derwin James not playing well. Quentin Johnston, first-round wide receiver, not being able to be a factor this year at all has been a huge problem for them because additional moves that they made. Mike Williams, $20 million a year for a guy that's consistently fragile and gets broken. Well, he gets broken, and now you don't have your $20 million a year receiver, and the guy that you drafted to potentially be Mike Williams' contingency can't factor either. So that's 2/3 of your top 3 receivers just not doing anything this year. Austin Eckler gets hurt, comes back, doesn't look like the same guy again since that point. Joey Bosa has done very little this season. Like, everywhere you look, just the players that were supposed to be, the reason this team was good have not been.
The one other thing I'll add, at a high level, it feels like they've been playing roster whack-a-mole during the Brandon Staley era. And Tom Telesco.
That way either. Like, everywhere he was given any modicum of credit, it turns out in future, actually, no, it turns out that's not what was happening at all. He was just lucky that way.
I feel attacked.
Yeah?
I feel like you're speaking directly to me.
I'm not. I'm just saying, people. If you were people, so be it.
Speaking of people, this is the other thing that sums it up. Clearly, Brandon Staley overall did not do a great job as head coach for the Chargers. They did make the playoffs last year, but you would say, given a rookie contract to Justin Herbert, and I don't care where the discourse is on Herbert, he's a top 5 to 8 quarterback, probably closer to 5 than 8, and he's on a rookie deal, and so that's a wasted few years for the Chargers that they didn't even win a playoff game, and they blew a 20 whatever point lead in the playoffs. It's very interesting, the hiring process. Look at the difference between a Brandon Staley and a Dan Campbell and how we do the whole head coach hiring thing. And when people ask me, who's a good head coach candidate, and I insist I don't know. Like, how could I possibly know? Like, Ben Johnson from the Lions is going to be the hottest name this offseason because he calls the best plays. But 3 years ago, Brandon Staley called the coolest defensive plays. He wasn't 2-gapping, he wasn't 1-gapping, he was 1.5-gapping. He was changing the defensive scheme. It was the hot scheme. It was the scheme that was going to shut down Mahomes and the Chiefs and the best offenses. He was the best defensive play caller, the new hot defensive mind. It didn't matter because forget the X's and O's. Whatever it was, he was not getting the players on the team to play well. Dan Campbell in Detroit, what scheme is he associated with? Nothing. There's no scheme. You're not like he doesn't have to have a downhill power running attack. He doesn't have to have a blitz heavy scheme on defense. He doesn't have to have anything. He just hires people that are going to be good, gets the right people in the building, and motivates them and gets them playing well, which ultimately a head coach probably has to do. Some of them are going to call plays. It's just an interesting dynamic when we get into head coach hiring season. Clearly, Staley was not great at his job, and a guy like Dan Campbell is, and we always tend to lean on, the play calling and the stuff that we can see when the most important stuff is the stuff we can't see.
You know that moment in movies where somebody like questions the power of God, and then there's like a rumble of thunder, and they're like, "Oh, I take it back." I mentioned the player's name, and the building lost internet for 60 seconds. We lost Wi-Fi and Ethernet. So,
did we?
Yeah. So maybe
did the stream get?
It buffered for a while, and now we're back. But maybe I won't mention his name again because apparently there is power there that I mocked.
Number 3 on the Chargers. Can't do it again.
Yeah.
All right. Autopsy done on the Chargers?
Yeah, so cause of death, I think, is the important players just either not being healthy again or not playing at the level that they need to play at.
All right, let me find
including, by the way, Justin Herbert. I mean, his, at least I think, have reasons for it, like broken fingers and stuff. But he didn't play as well as he did previously, and that's an important element of this team not playing as well.
He's been hurt the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And so how much – look, I think there's a lot of QBs through the years that have played hurt.
Yeah.
And you don't know it.
Right,
Or
but
you don't focus on it. You don't think about it.
Yeah,
But
but there's a difference between playing hurt and playing with that giant scaffolding rig in his finger. Like I like I say, it's not his fault, but him playing not as well as he played in the past absolutely contributes to the team not playing well.
All right, before we get to the NFC, I want to tell everybody about our Prize Picks lineup for this week. PFF Prize Picks lineup from our guy Eli in the booth. We're going to go Tampa Bay Bucks running back Rachaad White, more than 69.5 rushing yards against the Saints. DeAndre Hopkins of the Titans, more than 54.5 receiving yards against the Texans. And then Matthew Stafford of the Rams, more than 255.5 passing yards against the Giants. That's all this weekend, New Year's Eve day. going more on all three because we're optimistic here. We like playing more over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. So you pick more, you pick less. It's that easy. Instead of battling thousands of players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on a 2 to 6 player stat projection and watch the winnings roll in. You play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz. You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries of some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy, so listen up. Your entries, they stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player that exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second half, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So you heard our lineup. You can follow along. You can do it yourself. Go check out Prize Picks, and you pick more, you pick less. That's it. You go to prizepicks.com/PFFNFL. You use the code PFFNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/PFFNFL. Use code PFFNFL and get your first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, NFC, starting in the East.
Well, let's start with Washington because we have breaking news.
Washington Commanders eliminated. They're 4-11. Breaking news from Sam.
Sam Howell's been benched. Jacoby Brissett will start against the 49ers. You're welcome, Jacoby. Coach Rivera is announcing.
This is an interesting one because clearly Sam Howell's hit a little bit of a rough patch here. You know, take that description that you had for Mac Jones and take Mark Bulger's career and compress it to Mac Jones and compress it even further maybe to
a single season.
To Sam Howell. Howell wasn't really that great. He was just intriguing, but clearly he's hit a rough patch here. But the Commanders, man, this is a move. Ron Rivera, almost certainly 1 foot out the door, much like Lovie Smith last year, playing to win when the Texans could have had the number 1 overall pick. The Commanders are sitting there with the 3rd overall pick, and they're going to start Jacoby Brissett, who is definitely playing better than Sam Howell right now.
Yeah.
And this could hurt the Commanders' draft stock a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the right move in that Sam Howell has just collapsed in recent weeks. But there's no like long-term purpose to this move. You know what I mean? Like Jacoby Brissett obviously isn't the answer in any kind of long-term. Sam Howell doesn't look like is the answer long-term either, but at least like he was the guy you were looking at this year. So if you have any, I mean, it's almost basically an admission at this point that we just don't have a quarterback anymore. So I have to sit this guy down. He's playing terribly. It's not helping him or us being out there right now. We're going to turn to Jacoby Brissett and hope that we're better this week. But it is basically, you know, rolling up the white flag, putting up the white flag and saying this season's done. We're toast. The Sam Howell thing didn't work. Sorry, and we're out. But man, you look at, I mean, he was a guy that was throwing regularly for over 300 yards, over 7 yards per attempt. The last, 5 weeks now, 255, 300, 127, 102, 56, 2 touchdowns in that 5-week period. None of those games were over 7 yards per attempt. Most of them were under 6. The last 2 have been 3.9 and then 2.5. Just a complete collapse is the word, like a complete and total collapse of Sam Howell's ability to move the ball, to play functional offense, to do anything positive.
Yeah. Sam Howell's game, you've highlighted it the last few game reviews. Look, the negative stuff was there, and you could say, he's a young quarterback. He's gonna take the sacks, the negative plays. He's gonna put the ball in harm's way. But at least, right? But at least once a game, twice a game, 3 times a game, he's making special throws, tight window throws, scrambles. Remember the 1 week against New England, I think he had the best throw of the week, the best scramble of the week, and the worst interception of the week for all quarterbacks, all in one. At least there were 2 good plays in there. Those have been gone these last few weeks. To me, it's a football decision by the coaching staff who only sees the next week. I don't think they're not thinking long term for the future of the Commanders and draft position or anything like that. They don't care. Ron Rivera and the coaching staff, they're just trying to say, hey, we're going to do what football coaches do and try to win the next football game, and the best person to give us a chance to win next week is Jacoby Brissett.
But I think
that's the decision.
I think it probably also says they don't think Howell can pull himself out of this. Like it's, if you thought that Howell might be able to get himself out of the rut that he's in right now, you might give him another shot and keep going until he does. I think it's also an admission that whatever nosedive he's in right now is a terminal one, and he's not coming out of the other side of it. Because the funny thing is, like all the criticisms we had about him earlier in the season, he's actually improved those things. Like he's getting sacked way less than he was earlier in the year. He got sacked once against the Jets. Like, okay, he got benched, so he didn't play the whole game. But 23 dropbacks, he got sacked one time. I mean, the first week, he got sacked 6 times on 40 dropbacks against Arizona, who don't have a pass rush. Like, it's a different world. He is, earlier in the season, the first 7 weeks of the year, every single week, he had a sack on more than 21% of his pressure dropbacks. That's a huge number. Since week 7, only one time has he been above like 19%. So he's completely shifted like the single biggest problem in his game. That's actually improved dramatically, which for him I think is really big because that was a problem that dated back to college and has always been there. So for him to make like material inroads on that element of his game is actually an amazing sign of like growth potential. The problem is, I don't know if it's caused a subsequent collapse in every other element of his game or if it's just coincidental that whilst he's improved his ability to avoid sacks, he has ceased to be a viable quarterback in any other area. So it doesn't matter. Like he's made an improbable improvement to his biggest weak point as a quarterback, and at the same time, cause or effect, has like lost the abilities that he had elsewhere.
I do think it's a struggle for every quarterback that we would describe as volatile. And again, I don't know what those discussions are like inside the building. Do you think the QB coach isn't like, "Hey Sam, you're a real boomer bust quarterback. We gotta find the balance there." But every volatile quarterback does have to find that balance. Whether you're volatile at a high level like Josh Allen, right, where the highs are as high as any quarterback in the league, but it comes with turnovers, or if you're a Sam Howell who's young and it's like, hey, we don't get sacked 5 or 6 times a game, but you're also making 3 or 4 really nice plays per game. Finding that balance is always a struggle, whether you're Sam Howell, whether you're Jameis Winston, whether you're Josh Allen. Like it's all different elements of the spectrum. The cause of death for Washington, and by the way, I think it's interesting that Washington and Atlanta were the 2 teams who bought into a 3rd and a 5th round QB, not sight unseen, but with very little experience, and just went all in with those guys this year. Probably won't work out for the Falcons. Still a chance that they make the playoffs. Didn't work out for Washington. I don't think it doesn't mean it was necessarily a bad strategy. I don't know if there were great alternatives, but that was the strategy. The cause of death for Washington, though, was Sam Howell ends up regressing, but all of that, the defense was a disaster.
Yeah,
absolute
honestly,
train wreck. And then they, in turn, ended up trading, their 2 best defensive linemen, 2 of their best defensive linemen, Montez Sweat and Chase Young.
The defense might be the cause of death, actually. Like
that's what it really was.
Sam Howell's fallen apart, and that's why they're turning to Jacoby Brissett now. But Sam Howell was playing pretty well till week 9 or 10, and at that point they were still, 1, 2, 3, 4. They were 4 and 6, 7. So they were still a losing team, even when Sam Howell was playing quite well. And then when Sam Howell stopped playing quite well, they haven't won a game since that point. So him playing well or not was the difference between struggling to below 500 to you're not going to win anymore. Like if he's playing this badly, you have 0 chance of winning games. When he was playing reasonably well, or at least giving a bunch of big plays, you had a shot, but you were still losing most games because your defense was terrible. You use that term whack-a-mole a lot with roster construction. The other thing that is in that same kind of realm to me is if you're chasing problems with your golf swing. I've seen your golf swing, but
1 out of every 20 is pretty sweet.
I assume at some point, if you're a good enough golfer, this stops happening. But if you're a terrible golfer, as most people are, you can only sort of think about one element of your swing at a time, right?
Yeah.
So something has happened to your golf swing. You find somebody who can point out the flaw, a pro or whatever, and you'd be like, "Oh, here's your issue. You gotta, tuck this elbow." So you constantly think about tucking this elbow, and then while you fix that, something else goes out of whack, right? Like your hip rotation is off, or you're not looking at the point, or your head's coming up too soon, or whatever it is. And you just spend your entire life like chasing the next problem from your golf swing and only thinking about one thing at a time, and then something else goes out of whack, and then you got to think about that thing. I wonder if that happens with quarterbacks where, and who knows, he might not even be aware of this as like a problem, or the coaching staff's never brought it up. But like if you're Sam Howell and you look at his early season like we were, and you're like, there's a lot to work with here, but the dude takes sacks at a like ridiculous level. He's got to fix that. Like, did he spend the next 6 weeks going, I got to avoid the sacks. All I got to think about is not taking sacks. And then doing that, like focusing so much on improving the sack thing.
Just getting rid of the ball. And
when everything else went to hell. And now you got to go back to, I don't know if that happens with quarterbacks where if they're working really hard to improve one specific facet, everything else kind of goes out of whack because your entire mind is focused on that. Or, as I say, it could be complete coincidence that more or less at the same time, his sack rate dramatically improved. Everything else went to hell.
The last thing I want to say here about Washington, if I'm Josh Harris, the owner, I'm stepping in and not letting this happen.
What? The move?
I'm not letting Jacoby Brissett start.
What? Why?
Washington's 4-11, currently the number 3 pick. If Arizona wins one of the next 2 games, maybe it's a long shot. I don't know the exact tiebreakers. Like if Arizona and Washington both have the same record, I don't know what the tiebreaker situation would look like. The number 2 pick is that valuable that I don't care about these last 2 games to have Jacoby Brissett go out there just because he's going to play better than Sam Howell.
I mean, they're also against San Francisco and Dallas.
It's against San Francisco and Dallas. You're probably going to lose anyway.
Right.
But they beat, like Sam Howell got, in his first NFL start, they beat the Cowboys in Week 18 last year, right? So you don't know what's going to happen. But Brissett, the last 2 times he's come in, this offense has looked dramatically different. So far from what we've seen.
You think
all I'm saying is, and Arizona doesn't have an easy road either. They have to play. Who do they have this? San Francisco. No, it's Seattle in the last week of the
Philly
season.
and Seattle.
Philly and Seattle. Like Arizona's probably going to lose the next 2 games. But if Arizona sneaks a win in there, and as the Commanders, they sneak a win in there, and they had a chance to go up to the number 2 pick and have either Drake May or Caleb Williams, that is a massive move, right? Again, the Lovie Smith one went from, it ended up working out, but Lovie Smith earned the Texans the 2 pick instead of 1, and so they didn't have their choice of Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud. They ended up with C.J. Stroud, which looks great for the Texans. This move, though, if Washington ends up picking 3rd instead of 2nd, you're looking at the difference between one of those 2 quarterbacks. Who knows what the drop-off is to QB3 in this class. Maybe you grab a Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, there are good players at the top, but you're missing out on one of those top 2 QBs.
I mean, I don't think Jacoby Brissett makes much of a difference in terms of their ability to win either of these 2 games. If I was Josh Harris and I was intent on that, definitely, I need to lose these 2 games, I would let them start Brissett, and I would have a word and say, hey, if by some miracle this game looks like it's actually going our way, find a way of making a balls of it in play calling terms, right?
No, that's illegal.
Run the ball.
That is illegal.
Whatever.
All I'm saying is it's a lot easier to say, yeah, Sam Howell's just a young quarterback still developing. Of course he's our starter.
But the Eagles did this. They pulled their starting quarterback when they were, when it looked like they could win a game. They pulled the starting quarterback. They got it. Like it was like a butterfly effect. The entire Eagles thing almost traces back to that one decision to lose a game deliberately.
Week 18 game,
right?
Butterfly affected into like 6 really good players.
Yeah. So I think you can just say, look, put them in. That's fine. But if it looks like we're actually winning this game, you need to call 7 straight run plays. Whatever. Find a way of losing it, even if it's not inserting Howe back into the lineup. I can't see that being an issue, but I think you can. There's a way of doing it. You're not call the fumble play. I'm not saying you do that, but like, stop taking shots. Let's call a draw here.
Speaking of calling plays in, New York Giants eliminated Tommy DeVito's team. Tommy. Giants 5-10. Cause of death for the Giants. Another team with the atrocious offensive line. It started early. Hasn't really gotten much better. It was bad play plus injuries and the whole thing. But yeah, the Giants have had a A rough season coming off their playoff appearance.
Yeah, I would say the offensive line is the underlying cause of all of it. Evan Neal was supposed to, a lot rested on Evan Neal's, the supposition that he would take a big step forward in year 2 as a former high first round pick, who had a terrible year 1. And so much of the Evan Neal optimism, I think, was based around the idea that Andrew Thomas just did this, right? Terrible year 1.
Right.
Really bad. And then look at him now. He's an all-pro. He got consistently better, and he took a huge step forward. Therefore, Evan Neal will too. And it's like, well, yeah. Number one, Andrew Thomas, it was a reason he played really badly to start with. They completely rebuilt his pass sets, his mechanics, all of it. And he struggled really badly right away. There was also coaching issues in terms of, too many voices. They finally settled on a guy. All this kind of stuff. So there were a few things and reasons why Andrew Thomas's career arc looked the way it did. Number 2, I don't think he was as bad as Evan Neal was right away. So, I think there was a lot of projection that this guy did it, therefore Evan Neal will. And there's been no evidence that's going to happen. He's been atrocious basically from day one in the NFL. Doesn't look any better this year. Has been hurt as well, so hasn't got the chance to do it for a lot of the season. But basically, he's been no better, and nothing else in the offensive line has been as well. Andrew Thomas has been hurt for a large period, so they haven't even had their one good player out there. But, they've had to sign Justin Pugh off the couch. John Michael Schmitz, the rookie center, hasn't played particularly well. The right guard situation has been bad. They've had a bad offensive line, and it's been banged up, so they've had to go into the bench where, the bench is even worse. So they're another one of those teams down at the very bottom end of pass blocking efficiency. They are 30th. The Titans and the Jets are worse, but they're all atrocious.
And then ironically, of the 3 quarterbacks who have started and have at least 100, 200 dropbacks, Daniel Jones, the $40 million quarterback, has played the worst of those 3. Played the worst, had the worst production. Small sample, relative to an entire season. Maybe Jones would have come out of it, but coming off a year with Daniel Jones, it was like, all right, he did just enough, and he runs a little bit, and if the situation around him is fine, Daniel Jones can operate the offense and add some value with his legs, and he won a playoff game. So, that really messed with people's minds. But the situation around him was not great.
Yeah, I think giving Daniel Jones the contract they gave him in the offseason was a mistake, but I don't think it's the cause of death for this season.
The offensive line.
Yeah. Now, I
is
think
the cause of death because this offense, 14.3 points per game, second worst in the NFL behind the Patriots. It all starts up front for the Giants, and run blocking too, right? It's both.
Right. Now, I think Daniel Jones was unusually bad for this offensive line. If you get given the scenario and you say, hey, we're going to have a not great group of receivers and one of the worst offensive lines we've seen in the last decade, who do you want as quarterback? Daniel Jones apparently would be one of the last players that you want behind that offensive line because he makes it look even worse. And you can see that because every time any other quarterback comes in, it looks immediately better. Whether it's Cutlets, whether it's Tyrod Taylor, either one of those guys is a better option behind this line than Daniel Jones. So I think he poured gas on the fire, but the fire was the offensive line. It wasn't Daniel Jones. The fact that they are now saddled with his contract is a different problem. It's not the reason that this season stinks.
Daniel Jones, he was the culprit on a bunch of sacks as well.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. He made the line look even worse. He made the problem look worse. He turned pressure into sacks. He's an unusually bad quarterback for a bad offensive line, but that's not to say that the line itself wasn't the problem to start with.
Expected news, not so much breaking news, but Tyrod Taylor will be getting the start this week.
Good for Tyrod.
For the Giants. Linsanity is over.
Linsanity is over.
Is Tommy still going to be doing appearances?
Well, he had to do a free one because of the fallout from doubling his rates.
The backup. Does the backup cut his rate in half when he's the backup? I'll still do the appearance, but I'm the backup now.
I don't know.
So Tyrod's going to start for the Giants. Yeah, it was again, for me, I like to go back to the root cause. Yeah, obviously, it's the offensive line. But I think it was a misevaluation of where they were, too. They built this team like it was a playoff team that, needed to, like, they wanted to keep the band back. They wanted to get the band back together on the playoff team from last year. God, how do we keep Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley? And we don't really want to pay Barkley, but we want to keep him around. How do we get the band back together? And then just add a Darren Waller, which, like, that should have been a great move for the Giants on paper. You know, as long as he stayed healthy. All right, now we've got this pass-catching tight end. Look how good we were on offense last year without great weapons. You added Darren Waller to the mix. That'll change everything. So it felt like they were just adding pieces to a playoff team rather than it was year 2 of a rebuild where in year 1 they happened to make the playoffs by a lot of luck.
I think they got greedy when they went to last offseason because they had, Daniel Jones, that decision was due. Saquon Barkley was there. I think they just wanted to they didn't want to make the tough decision, which is, look, we can probably only keep one of these guys, and you have to make the call which one. And they went, no. Or we can actually just give Daniel Jones this contract, free up the franchise tag to use on Saquon Barkley, and then we can keep them both.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, well, you can, but it doesn't come without cost. And the cost is you gave Daniel Jones a giant contract when you weren't really sure he was the guy. Like, Daniel Jones last season was tailor-made for the franchise tag. That is why it exists, which is we have a guy who played pretty well in year 1 of a new system with a bad supporting cast around him. We don't know if he can be the guy yet, but we also don't know he can't. Like, he showed enough that we think, yeah, maybe. So you give him a franchise tag, you see how it works this year. And then if it works out well again, or it gets even better, then you give him the big contract. Instead, they're like, no, we've seen enough already. Let's give him the contract now, and let's just hope we're right. And they weren't. Like, you got too greedy, and you got punished for it.
Yeah. That's it for the Giants?
Yep. Cause
All
of
starts.
death, offensive line.
Offensive line, the biggest cause
again.
of death. 2 more teams in the NFC that have been eliminated. The Carolina Panthers, they're 2-13, eliminated. And the worst part about this is the team with the worst record in the NFL does not own their own first-round pick, so that's going to the Bears.
Yeah. Another one where I think the biggest cause of death is the offensive line. Now, there would be an interesting argument to be made that the cause of death is the meddling billionaire, but I think when you looked at this team...
That's understood, though, for every team.
When you looked at this team heading into the season, it's like, okay, they made the move for Bryce Young. You kind of need Bryce Young to be good, but the rest of this roster, receiving core is a problem. They traded away DJ Moore to make it happen. That's a concern. They didn't do a great job of backfilling that. They didn't find another move to make happen. A new Hopkins, for example. They didn't do that. They went with what they had. But the supposition, I think, that was the most wrong from everybody was that offensive line looked okay. And then it hit we hit the regular season, and it was immediately apparent that actually it's not okay at all. In fact, it's a train wreck. And, former first-round pick Ike Ekwonu has taken a huge step backwards. Like, there's been guys missing. Austin Corbett hasn't been there. Like, they haven't necessarily had the starting 5 that they wanted. But 4 out of the 5 linemen on that unit have been bad from basically start to finish.
In hindsight, yeah, it looks bad. But if we came into the season, I mean, there's probably a clip of me in the thousands and thousands of hours that we have recorded that if you assume a year 2 jump from Ike Ekwonu, that he's going to play a little bit better. Taylor Mouton has been one of the better right tackles, consistent right tackles in the league.
Yeah, he's been the 1 out of the 5 that's been good.
Those are your tackles. And you just mentioned an injured Austin Corbett and Bradley Bozeman as 2 other starters. Those 2 are like the epitome of creep back to our average
that's
type
what I'm saying.
of players, right?
This
so
line
4 out of 5
shouldn't
looked
have been
reasonable.
Yeah, it shouldn't have been bad, but it is.
But it's been horrendous. And then I also, optimistic Steve, in the offseason, could have said, I kind of get it with the receiving core. You gave up DJ Moore, and look, I know Adam Thielen's not the same that he used to be, but he'll play my most common reference.
Thielen's been good.
He's been good. He'll play late career Reggie Wayne. I didn't know they were going to move him in the slot necessarily, but he'll play, dependable guy while you have the 1-year flyer on DJ Chark. They just brought him in for 1 year just to be a receiver.
If they drafted Puka Nacua or Tank Dell instead of Jonathan Mingo, right? How different would that situation be right now?
It would probably feel different.
I'm not saying Mingo has no shot in future. I still like Mingo's talent and his skill set, but it became so a lot about this Carolina team. There was the offseason sort of discussion, the Bryce Young thing, and then there was those few months, right, where you kind of look at the lay of the land now, right? Free agency's done, the draft's done, post-free agency, post-draft, the roster is complete. Now let's look on paper what this should be going into the season. When you did that, there were a lot of things that were different in the season, and it became very clear very quickly that we just had it wrong from the on-paper analysis, right? In preseason, that offensive line looked terrible. And obviously preseason is preseason, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything. But that was one of the things that did mean something. You looked at multiple plays, you're like, guys, this Panthers offensive line might stink. And if it does, that's an issue. The line was terrible. And then the other thing that became clear very quickly was Jonathan Mingo is not going to be an immediate success. Like all the way, again, through preseason, there was a ton of plays where him and Bryce Young are not on the same page, and it didn't look like Bryce Young's fault, right? So I think Mingo can still be a productive player and a guy that has success in future, but it wasn't going to happen right away. Like he's mentally behind the eight ball. Now, the concern is other players that's been true for recently have never come back. I mean, that was a problem for Sky Moore last year, and he stinks at the moment. So I don't know if that's an indication that it's never going to be there for Mingo, but the point being, it was obvious pretty quickly that he wasn't going to be a year one contributor or in any serious manner, but those were out there in the draft, right? And those are actually not that hard to find if you look throughout the draft these days. So if they had drafted a Tank Dell, or a Puka Nacua or any of these mid-round receivers that actually have immediate success, how much different would the situation look?
That's why you have to, I think, draft in volume. You draft high-value positions in volume. A Packer strategy that we've talked about before. There's been multiple.
Dontavian Wicks.
Yeah.
What if they drafted Dontavian Wicks?
Right. Like the Packers in just forever have had years where they've drafted 2 or 3 corners, 2 or 3 receivers. And sometimes the 4th rounder is better than the 2nd rounder, or the 5th rounder is better than the 3rd rounder. It happens. And so to me, that's the thing, right? Once you trade DJ Moore, once you give up all that draft capital, it's going to take time to rebuild the assets to go build around Bryce Young. So it was always going to be a step back, I think, for the roster around Bryce Young before it goes forward. Now, again, it's the extra, the extra pain of you would have had the number 1 overall pick again this year. But they've got to battle back and build that receiving core, find pass catchers. Tight end has not been good. There's nothing for the future that feels good about Carolina's offense, basically.
Yeah.
And so all of that, I think, is the cause of death here.
Yeah, I mean, my point with that is the receivers are bad, but I think there might have been ways out of that, whereas the offensive line, that's the thing that underlies all this. I mean, you look at that list again that I keep going back to, the pass blocking efficiency, Carolina are 29th. So the Titans, the Jets, the Giants, all of whom eliminated, the Panthers are the next team on that list. The offensive line is the underlying cause of all of this. It's why Bryce Young doesn't look good. I think the receivers would probably look better if the offensive line was better. And I think that receiving core might have been salvaged with like the process, right, of Mingo. Reasonably high draft pick to try and salvage that receiving group might have worked out if they just drafted a different guy, right? And obviously you have to hit the right one, and you get lucky sometimes. Like the Rams liked Puka Nacua, but
yeah, of course, there's luck in the 5th round.
Yeah,
getting him there, or even Tank Dell in the 3rd, right? If Tank Dell's a couple inches taller, he's early 2nd.
Yeah, I mean, I love Tank Dell, but you need to get lucky enough that he slides to that spot or a spot low enough that you can take him.
All right, Arizona Cardinals eliminated. They're 3-12. Cause of death was, it's an interesting one for the Cardinals. They were in a unique situation.
This one where it's not the offensive line.
No, I mean, to me, go ahead. What do you think the cause of death was for the Arizona? Why did Arizona not make the playoffs this year?
Why did they not make the playoffs? I think the biggest thing is they just don't have defensive talent at all, any of it.
Yeah.
The offense has actually been okay. It's been functional. The offensive line has been okay. It's been creep back toward average standard, right? The quarterback play between Josh Dobbs and then Kyler Murray has been fine. The receivers have been sort of pleasant surprise between various contributions from different players. Trey McBride emerging as a true superstar tight end. The offense has been okay. The defense it stinks. It's just not good enough. There's no talent there. And, you sort of pinpoint various players that maybe they would have placed some stock on improving. It just hasn't happened enough. The biggest issue, I think, is they have no real pass rush. I know the Barbarian has had a few sacks, not a huge consistent amount. I mean, Cameron Thomas, those mid-round draft picks that they grabbed a couple of. I mean, Myjai Sanders is no longer with the team, and Cameron Thomas hasn't gotten any better while he's been there. So that has been an issue. Zaven Collins actually moving to the edge. I mean, I think he's their best graded defender this year. But even that has only been like a moderate success. You know what I mean? So I think they just don't have the defensive talent.
Yeah, I mean, and again, you're given the on-field descriptions. I appreciate that. I'll go back to how did we get here, which was they were in this unique position where they knew Kyler Murray was going to miss the majority of the season, and they were in the middle of a regime change where the team didn't have talent. So they knew this was a rebuilding season. They knew this was a season where they should be picking first or second, and they're right now picking second. So I think this was the expectation for the Cardinals. They overachieved early on because Josh Dobbs would ball out, and they were playing hard, and I think that was great. It was a perfect rebuild for Jonathan Gannon coming in as the head coach, showing they could be competitive in a whole bunch of games, but you knew that the talent gap is just too much for the Cardinals. So now they're in this position where they'll probably pick second, third at worst probably. They'll be able to grab a blue chip non-quarterback if they want, tackle, quarterback, whatever it might, receiver, whatever it might be. They can go quarterback if they want to. But this was the expectation this year. I think we had more hope for Carolina. Again, it's very tough to put yourself in the position of what did you think in June and August and leading up to the season. I didn't think Carolina looked like the worst team in the league.
No.
Arizona was expected to be the worst team in the league.
Yeah.
With or without Kyler Murray, I think so. Right? I think they were going to be.
Well,
then like with Kyler, it's like, okay, maybe they're a 5 or 6 win team, but they're not great. Without Kyler, they're a 1 or 2 win team, and they're sitting here with 3 wins heading into week 17.
The on-paper preseason expectation was Arizona has a very good chance to be picking 1 and 2.
Right.
Like the idea was that the Cardinals,
the
Cardinals would be the worst team in the NFL, and the Texans would be the second worst. As opposed to a playoff team, like that team actually threatening postseason play. So, yeah, they were expected to be awful, and they've definitely outperformed that. So, the cause of death was almost they were set up for this. Like, this is supposed to be a bad year.
This is that year, yeah. It would have been interesting to see what Arizona would do if Kyler Murray wasn't hurt for the season.
Right.
You would say, hey, you just paid Kyler Murray a lot of money. You got a new coach and new regime in there.
So
you better build around Kyler Murray.
So here you go. Cause of death, suicide.
Jeez.
It was intentional. I mean, they designed this year to be a bad year so that they have high first round draft picks, and next year is when we turn it around.
I mean, it was an easy. Jeez. I don't want to say it was an easy decision to do the cause of death that you just said. I'm just saying it was an easy decision for Arizona to say, well, not this year, right? Let's look to 2024. All of our decisions are pointing toward 24. It's not suicide. You're coming back to life next year,
Okay, temporary. I don't know. That's not a thing.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I get it.
But it's self-inflicted. I mean, the whole point is they designed this year to kind of be a tank job, right? To bail on this season because they don't have a quarterback for the majority of the year. In fact, you could have been without Kyler Murray for longer if you wanted to take it easy on his recovery. But next year was when you're going to have a viable chance at anything because you have Kyler Murray back, you have the ability to deploy those 2 first-round draft picks, and the guys you drafted a year ago are going to be, a season better, like Paris Johnson, et cetera. So it's a deliberate, self-inflicted decision to not be good this year.
Self-inflicted wounds for Arizona. That's it. Mm-hmm. So that was fun. It was like a preview of the offseason, the depth that we will go team by team. That's it for eliminated teams.
Yep, we remembered the Titans, and we covered everybody else.
Yeah, you will remember. Sometimes we don't remember the Titans.
It's happened one time. We forgot the Titans.
One time. But I forgot the Texans one year with Chris. I dragged Chris's podcast to the 2.5 hour limit.
Nice.
I dragged him into the abyss of what we do. And he didn't know what he was getting into. He was like, let's go team by team. I'm like, Chris, come on.
We can do that, but
You have time?
Just a warning. Do you know how long that's going to take?
We did it for 31 teams.
31.
Forgot Houston.
Nice.
And that was in the middle of when they kept signing special teamers. So it was like, all right, that's fine. We're not going to review Houston's
We didn't miss
offseason.
anything.
Thank you. But that was fun. A little preview of what we like to do here in the offseason. Go team by team and fix them all, or at least describe what happened through our lens here. So that it for today?
I believe so.
Well, thanks to everybody for tuning in. We're back here tomorrow with the preview for Week 17. Full slate again.
Dude, Christmas is throwing my entire, whatever the weekly equivalent of a circadian rhythm is, where you've got
We're grinding it out here.
the day-by-day cadence of the week that's the same every week in season. Now it's different because Christmas happened. The whole week's thrown to hell.
Yeah, look at it. I'm 3 days in a row here,
Right.
you and me together.
Madness.
Everything's
It's not supposed
different.
to happen.
Everything's different. So, yeah, we'll be back here tomorrow with more PFF NFL Podcast.